Zuri steps out of the taxi with one suitcase and a head full of plans. The gate to Kijani estate is the same, but her bungalow has a new, shining padlock and strangers are moving in like they own the place. Two men carry a velvet sofa through her window while dust settles on the family photos still sitting on the mantel. A polished agent smiles too easily and waves a glossy paper he calls a sale deed. He says her parents signed. Nearby, her phone lights up with posts from Kibo, sipping champagne on a yacht, throwing up boomerangs like nothing is wrong. Zuri's throat goes dry and then hot. She asks for the keys, the agent shrugs and points to the deed, his words soft and sure as if proof can replace a home. She asks where her parents are, and someone laughs, then says they went away, that she had moved abroad permanently. A neighbor appears, shocked, then points to CCTV on his phone showing men with moving boxes arriving the same hour her flight left for Kigali. Her lawyer aunt, who rushed over after the call, reads the glossy paper and frowns at a signature that looks like her mother but isn't. People gather in the lane, whispering. Kibo posts another selfie, smiling wider. Zuri breathes slow, counts the evidence already in her hands, and decides she will not be outplayed in her own story. Not today, Zuri. The land registry smells like dust and paper and the calm that comes before trouble, and Zuri walks in with Auntie Nandi, her lawyer, holding her hand like a lifeline. They stand at a long counter where clerks tap at slow keyboards, and Zuri feels every second stretch as if the whole world waits for a signature. Auntie Nandi asks for the file on Kijani estate and the clerk brings out a thick folder that should belong to her family, but the pages inside move like strangers. There is a power of attorney sitting in neat ink, dated the same week Zuri flew to Kigali. The signature looks like her mother's, but it is too smooth, the loop's wrong, the way the pen lifted at the end is different. Auntie Nandi tilts the paper into the light and her mouth tightens. She pulls up scanned records on the registry computer and points to a chain of entries that no one told Zuri about. Then she drags out a bank slip, printed and stamped, showing a wire into an account named Tari Family Projects, a name that sounds safe and family-like it was meant to hush questions. The amount is large enough to buy a home twice over. Zuri's heart knocks so loud she can hear it in the quiet room. The buyer, Mr. Okuta, is there in a crisp shirt and a face that wants to look surprised. He fumbles with his phone and says, with a voice that slips when the cold truth touches him, that he was told Zuri moved abroad permanently. He says the agent told him that the owners wanted to sell fast, that signatures were in order, that it was a clean deal. The registry printout shows the transfer hitting the Shell account right after the agent sent the scanned power of attorney. Auntie Nandi asks who owns Tari Family Projects, and the clerk scrolls and taps and then points to a shadowy company registration that lists a mailbox and a nominee director. The name on the registration is not her parents'. Zuri stares at the words on the screen and feels the scene from the bungalow slide behind her like a bad film. People in the registry start to lean in. A young clerk whispers that the transfer came from the buyer's bank, then rerouted through a chain of small transfers that end in a coastal bank account with a name that matches a number used in Kibo's posts. Zuri's phone buzzes with a new message, a screenshot of Kibo's yacht boomerang with a timestamp that matches the transfer. For the first time the pieces fit together like a map. Auntie Nandi breathes out and says calm words that carry steel. She says they will freeze the funds, she says they will demand original IDs, she says forgery is a crime. Zuri looks at Mr. Okuta, his surprise losing shape into guilt, and feels the first honest hope that the house could be hers again. Zuri moved like a woman with a single clear job, stitched time back together. She sat on the floor of her small living room with her laptop open, her phone facing her, and a pile of printed bank alerts and screenshots at her side. She started with Kibo's social feed, saving every video and photo he posted that day. Each boomerang had a little clock in the corner and a short location tag. She took screenshots, zoomed in, and noted the exact minute he toasted with champagne. Then she opened her own bank alerts and printed the message that showed the deposit leaving the buyer's account. The numbers matched the minute on Kibo's post almost exactly. Next came the ride-hailing receipts. Zuri had kept the emails from the trip to the airport. The receipt showed the driver picked her up at 9:14 and dropped her at the terminal at 10:02. The payment for the bungalow appeared in the buyer's bank record at 9:22. She tapped the timestamps on her phone like a metronome and felt the pattern lock into place. Uncle Masha, who lived across the lane, walked over with his phone held out like evidence. He had pulled the CCTV from his small shop and showed a grainy clip of two men carrying boxes through her back gate at 9:20, the exact minute between her ride receipt and the bank transfer. One of the men wore a cap with the agent's company logo. She paused the footage, blew on her thumb to clear the screen, and froze the frame. The mover's van had a dusty license plate. Zuri snapped a photo of the paused frame and then matched it to a vehicle image a neighbor had taken and sent in a group chat. Every tiny thing lined up: the post, the boat boomerang, the transfer, the receipt, the CCTV. She printed the timestamps, highlighted them, and stacked them in a neat pile. She also saved voice notes where her brother laughed and said they sold because she was gone for good. Those files felt like nails. Auntie Nandi came back with a small USB stick and a legal pad. She wrote down what would matter in court: original ride receipts, bank alerts with official headers, CCTV with verified time, and copies of the social posts with metadata showing upload times. She explained, simply, that social posts are evidence when they can be tied to real-world events by time and place. Zuri watched Auntie Nandi write the list and felt something like relief and rage mix in her chest. She had been told to trust people who called themselves family and agents, but her receipts would not lie. She sent the folder to a private investigator who would verify the GPS pings and the van's registration, and then she texted a calm message to Kibo asking why he was on a yacht when their house had been sold. He replied with an emoji and silence. Zuri closed her laptop, looked at the stack of printed timestamps and images, and for the first time in days allowed herself to plan the next move with steady hands. At first light, Zuri and Auntie Nandi stood outside the courthouse while the city woke and the sky turned from purple to pale. The judge called the case urgent, and after a short hearing Judge Mapendo signed an emergency injunction that did exactly what they had hoped: the title was frozen and the buyer's funds were blocked. Auntie Nandi folded the paper with slow, careful hands and handed a copy to Zuri, who felt her breath catch and then steady. The clerk stamped a copy and the bailiffs left with orders. By 9 the bailiffs were at Kijani Estate. They walked up the path with heavy boots and a red seal already on their clipboard. Neighbors watched from porches and a few people followed at a distance with phones out. The bailiffs nailed a red seal over the gate and took a photograph for the court record. The seal was bright and official. It meant no one could lawfully move anything out, and the bank could not touch the money until the court said so. Word moved faster than the early market stalls. A message thread lit up with the photo of the seal and someone wrote, in all caps, "House frozen." Zuri felt the small tight knot in her chest loosen like a rope coming free. Then her parents arrived, breathless and loud, Baba Lunga and Mama Tari pushing through the crowd. They shouted about family rights and custom, about how a house belongs to the elders and must be settled by the village. People clustered around them, some nodding, some shaking heads. Auntie Nandi walked to the gate and held up the injunction. A murmur turned to a hush. She read the key lines out loud so everyone could hear: the title is frozen, the funds are frozen, anyone who interferes risks contempt of court. Baba Lunga reached for the paper as if to snatch it and then hesitated when he saw Judge Mapendo's name and stamp. Mama Tari's voice wavered. The bailiffs handed both of them copies of the court order and explained, calmly but firmly, that the law would decide ownership, not anger at the gate. A neighbor started recording, and someone in the crowd shouted that this was the right thing. Zuri watched her parents reading the same lines she had read hours before, and she felt no small victory. She did not gloat. She kept her hand on Auntie Nandi's arm and told herself to stay steady because the injunction only stopped harm for now. It put a pause on the theft, but did not answer who would pay damages or why the signatures were forged. Still, as the sun climbed and the red seal glinted, Zuri allowed herself a small, steady hope. The gate was closed, the money was held, and the court had said, in clear paper and stamp, that someone had better explain. The Makoba elders' hall smelled of wood polish, sweat, and the quiet that comes when everyone waits for the oldest voices to speak, and Zuri stood at the front with a small projector and a screen made of white cloth, feeling like she was about to show proof to a room that had long decided its own rules. She pressed play and 4 minutes later the room was watching her life on a loop. The clip began with a close-up of a pen tracing a name that looked like her mother but bent wrong at the end. Then it cut to bank slips with rows of numbers, timestamps, and a line that showed money moving into an account called Tari Family Projects. The next shot was of Kibo on a yacht, champagne in hand, with the little clock on the video matching the minute on the bank record. Finally the footage showed grainy CCTV of men carrying boxes into Zuri's back gate at the exact hour her ride-hailing receipt said she left for the airport. No music, no shout, just facts on a screen, each minute labeled, each screenshot with a tiny corner that read upload time. The elders sat very still. The oldest, who everyone called Mzee Kido, had his hands folded and his jaw tight. Some people shifted in their seats as if they felt the evidence move like a tide against their habits. When the clip ended there was a small sound like a breath being held. Auntie Nandi stepped forward and spoke plainly, the words careful and clear enough for even the youngest in the room to understand. She said that custom is important, that elders make decisions for the good of the village, but custom cannot be used to cover a crime. She said forgery and theft are crimes under the law and that papers that lie are not honored just because someone says so. She pointed to the timestamps, to the bank trail, and to the voice note where a man admits the plan. She asked the elders to listen not with loyalty to a name but with respect for truth. A few voices tried to say that family matters should stay between family, that elders should sort it quietly. Others, quieter at first, said that a woman who brings evidence deserves to be heard. Mzee Kido looked at Zuri and then at the elders and asked a question that shifted the room: would they honor the village name if it was built on lies? That question landed heavy. One by one the elders nodded, some slowly, some with faces flushed, until the old man who had first spoken raised his hand and said they would not protect theft. They agreed to support Zuri in taking the matter to the city courts and to help contact neighbors who had video and receipts. Outside, people who had watched the clip on phones began to share it, and the thread filled with messages of surprise and support. Zuri felt the weight in her shoulders lighten a little. She had not won everything, but in the place where custom often ruled, the elders had chosen truth over cover-up, and that choice moved through the village like wind through tall grass. By mid-morning the city felt different, as if someone had flipped a switch and the calm was gone. Kanda Holdings accounts showed frozen flags and the bank told partners to stop transfers. Investors who had spoken with friendly smiles the night before suddenly pulled back their calls and their emails. Contractors who had not been paid for months lined up at bank branches and at supplier doors demanding money and answers. Someone in the crowd posted the earlier banquet clip again, this time with screenshots of the papers Amina had sent, and the two things together made a hard picture everyone could understand. Musa's phone would not stop buzzing. Margin calls, urgent messages from lenders, and lawyers asking for explanations filled his screen. He moved through the halls of his offices like a man surprised to find the floor giving way. Security guards and aides whispered and shuffled papers, and the confident voice he used in meetings came out small. The glow of the chandeliers at the banquet seemed to dim as the feeds carried his troubles back to the same rooms where people had once toasted him. Journalists set up live cameras outside Kanda Towers and at the small shops in Nuru that had finally seen justice in motion. Social feeds were loud with reactions: shock, pleasure, worry for the workers, and angry questions for those who had enabled the loans. Jallo watched his father's world unravel and felt its edges crack under his feet. He could not fix everything with words. The bailout offers that should have arrived did not. Lines of credit were paused until audits could prove the assets were real. In less than a morning a polished empire showed seams and empty promises. For many it was sudden, for some it was a long time coming. A house of cards did not need a strong wind to fall, it only needed the right hand to take away one careful card. The next morning the sound of sirens was small but sharp, like a scissors cutting a thread, and before noon the agent who had smiled too easily the week before was led away in handcuffs. Police had watched the live stream, read the evidence Auntie Nandi had filed, and found enough to arrest him on suspicion of fraud. He did not have the same smile for the cameras this time. At the hearing the judge did not waste words. Papers were read out loud, timestamps and bank trails placed before the court, and the judge ordered immediate steps to undo the damage. Kibbo, who had been avoiding calls and posting late-night island photos, was named in the order and told to return the money he had helped move. The court looked at the chain of transfers and the small company account that hid the funds, and it ordered banks to trace every step and move the money back into the buyer's account until the truth was clear. The judge also made a clear ruling that Baba Lunga and Mama Tari must repay damages and legal fees because the sale had been set in motion with forged papers that used their names. That part surprised some people who had expected elders to be excused. Mr. Okuta, the buyer, sat quietly and then spoke to the court. He said he had been told the sale was clean and that he had acted in good faith. He agreed to help fix what had happened by signing papers to reverse the sale and by promising to testify about what he was told. The police asked questions that made other names appear, and some people who once kept quiet began to give statements. The agent's phone was checked and several messages named movers, bank contacts, and an email address that led investigators deeper into the scheme. Neighborhood pages filled with videos of the agent being taken away and messages of relief and warning. People who had lost faith in law said they were surprised to see it work, while others cautioned that court orders are only words until money and deeds change hands. Zuri felt her shoulders loosen in a way she had not in weeks, but she did not celebrate loud. Auntie Nandi reminded her that restitution takes time and proofs must be tied up cleanly before the house would be safe again. Still, when the court clerk handed her a copy of the order that said funds were to be repatriated and that the sale was reversed, she sat on the courthouse steps and let the paper sit in her hands. It read like an answer. People around her clapped quietly, neighbors she barely knew offered tea, and the city feeds filled with the news that a small house had turned a great wrong into a legal victory. The case was not finished, but the first hard steps toward righting the theft were ordered, and the men who had thought they could profit without risk were learning how public and fast the law could move when a woman kept receipts and would not be pushed away. Zuri did not want a victory that could be taken back, so she made a choice that closed every door. In a quiet office, with Auntie Nandi beside her, she signed papers to transfer Kijani estate into the Kijani Women's Trust and wrote herself in as the lifetime occupant. The trust meant the house belonged to the community of women she trusted, and the lifetime occupant clause meant no one, not even Zuri, could later sell it away. It was a clever lock that felt right with her hands on the keys. After the registry updated the title, Zuri walked back to the bungalow with 2 new keys and a small crowd following. She changed the locks slowly and carefully, the sound of the tumblers closing like final punctuation. Neighbors cheered softly as she fitted the last bolt. The news moved faster than a market rumor. The city feeds filled with the story, and the same line ran through every comment thread: never play with a woman who keeps receipts. Kibbo's photos kept coming, but his yacht sponsor saw the live streams and the court papers and decided a public tie was bad business. The sponsor quietly ended the deal and Kibbo's champagne selfies went silent. Baba Lunga and Mama Tari asked for a microphone and read a short apology on a small stage in the village square. Their words were clumsy, but they were on record and that mattered. Mr. Okuta signed the reversal forms and the banks moved the money back where it belonged. The registry stamped the new deed and sent a notice that the title was clear. Zuri stood on her own veranda that evening, the place smelling like lemon soap and fresh paint, and thought about how evidence had been her best tool. She had lost a week of trust and gained a lifetime of protection. People stopped her in the street to say well done and to tell their own small stories of being taken. The chant in the feeds kept growing until it sounded like a warning and a promise all at once. Zuri smiled, slipped the new key into her pocket, and locked the door behind her.